Somebody's connecting.
Hello, Girl Scout Spirit of Nebraska. My name is Erin Finken. I'm the program specialist for the Omaha area. And today we will be talking about entrepreneurship. So what is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship, the definition is the activity of setting up a business or businesses, taking on financial risks in the hope of profit. So the quote attached to this definition is, the new business opportunities have encouraged entrepreneurship on a grand scale. We have two entrepreneurs with us today, Roger Riley and Libby Riley. They are now retired, but owned two contractor businesses over their 35-year tenure as self-employed business owners. Their businesses were Riley Signs and Graphics and McGill Painting. Libby was the first woman in the Nebraska Painters Union, Local 109 in 1975, and Roger is an artist. Their work has spanned signage you may have seen around the Omaha Metro, to church decorating, to sculpture. Welcome, Libby and Roger. Thanks for joining us today. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you guys about what it's like to be a small business owner. So can you tell us about your businesses? What did they do, and why did you decide to start your own business?
You want me to go first?
Sure. Why not?
We decided to start our own businesses primarily because we could work out of our home, and that would allow us a lot of freedom to have time with our kids. And it meant working odd hours, but we could set our hours, and it just gave us a lot of freedom that we were after. I don't know, what was the other part you said?
What did your businesses do? What kind of work did you do?
Okay. Initially, we ran a sign shop in Omaha, Nebraska, out of our home there. And then when we moved to Missouri Valley, we didn't do the sign shop anymore. We switched to doing more church work. We have done church work since our first child was born in 1978. We used to travel for the first 5 years of our marriage doing churches. And then when we had kids, we got out of that because of the travel involved. But we went back to our roots later and redecorated historic buildings, landmarks, and churches. We also did, if you're in Omaha, we did all the noise walls that are on the interstate, and they are concrete that are painted to look like stone.
And you guys sent me some pictures, so I'll put some of these pictures up here. How did you guys prepare yourselves for starting your own business? Did you go to school for it? Was it strictly work experience?
Our sign business, our first business, we actually decided to do that because we thought we would reach a bigger market, more people with signs, rather than just do freelance art or something more limited. When we got back into the church business, that we had already kind of established ourselves in that area, and therefore we had a clientele that we had in mind going into it. As far as preparation, the first thing you have to do when you're thinking about starting your own business is you have to make sure that you are financed properly. And what does that mean? Well, most people can't go to the bank and get money right away. You have to prove that you can do the business before the banks will loan you any money. So we worked for other people, and we saved our money, and we collected tools, and we tried to prepare ourselves for the leap into working for ourselves.
We also did have to have some schooling to do what we did. I went to school for 4 years in the 3 years, sorry, in the Painters Union as I was an apprentice, and then you go to school 2 nights a week and Saturdays, plus work full-time doing on-the-job training. Roger is basically a self-taught artist. I taught him to paint. He did go to art school for a couple months in Minnesota, but most of the things he knows are just things that he wanted to learn about, so he sought out to learn how to do various things.
So would you say that it's difficult to start an entrepreneurial venture just outright that most people you know that were self-employed, did they start as kind of a part-time and then eventually went to full-time as a self-employed person?
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's, you have to prepare yourself. Once again, not only do you have to know what it is you're going to do and know about it, you have to be capitalized.
But there are people that do take over family businesses and then are self-employed, but that's different. That's somebody else has already built and established the business. If you're building the business yourself and your family is totally dependent on the income from that business, you can't just jump in with nothing. You have to have something to back you up.
So I have some pictures up here if you can see. I'm looking at one of Roger up on a scaffold here. Can you tell me what's happening in this picture? Is that molding being
Yeah.
painted?
That was all painted white. That's in a historic home in Nebraska City. It's just a beautiful home. But everything in there in that room was from the molding up was all plain white. And so the molding just kind of disappeared. And the owner wanted it to be finished in a more traditional style, which this is Roman gold. We've done just tons of Roman gold in our career. It's just a particular kind of finish where you put the bronze on and then you gold leaf and then you antique and wipe off so that the highlights stand out. What Roger's doing there, that step is the antiquing. It's a fairly lengthy process, but it's just absolutely gorgeous when it's done. When we finished this room, this was the owner's dining room, and she said, well, I don't have the money to do as much as I want, but then she said, but will you just go do the living room next? So a lot of times our jobs do end up being things like that, that after people see what we can do, they're like, well, do more, and they give us more work.
Oops. That's my page here. Okay.
We never, in all of our years in business, never have advertised. All of our work has come to us through word of mouth. And we've been very fortunate in that we've always had plenty of work. So you can see on the right side that it's antiqued, and on the left, it's not antiqued yet. So it just is a lot richer when it's been antiqued.
And that was all white to start?
Yes, it was all white.
Wow.
And
Okay.
and the resident lived in the house, so that's why there was so much plastic and stuff. We had to protect everything. She's got just tons of valuables everywhere in there, and we don't want to break anything or damage anything. We're always very careful wherever we go.
This looks like one of the church photos from one of the church restorations. Is that correct?
This is Rayville, Nebraska, and this is a true restoration. This church is still all original finishes, and they had a lot of water damage from before putting on their new roof, and they wanted to just repair the water damage so that everything would still look like it did when the church was built at the turn of the century in the early 1900s, like 1917, I believe. It's just a breathtakingly beautiful church, but it had an enormous amount of damage. And how high is that, Roger? 40 feet?
I think 32, something
32.
like that. The interesting thing in a church is that you're constantly figuring out how to rig it because the floors at different levels. Some churches, the floors are slanted.
Yeah.
So we constantly had to rely on our experience from prior to going into business for ourselves and what we had learned with working with people that did rigging.
And we did through the years of doing these restoration type jobs. This I call our geriatric scaffold because it's all aluminum. It's very lightweight and easy for us to move. We used to have a lot of steel scaffold, and that's great, except that the older we got, the harder it was to manage that kind of scaffolding. We did own all of our own equipment, including lifts that we could take into the church and use. And we both do use the lifts and the scaffold both. And we'll do a church primarily just the two of us. Once in a while, we'll hire somebody for a week or two. Maybe if we do hire our kids because they're very skilled at what we do. And we need people that are skilled at what we do.
This seems like kind of a niche market. How did you find these people? Did you advertise? Was it word of mouth?
Really word of mouth. I mean, there's,
For
yeah.
the most part.
We might hear about from like Catholic Mutual had gotten our name from somebody, and they insure all the Catholic churches in Nebraska for sure. And once they got our name, they started giving our name out to other people after they saw what we could do. So it really has just been word of mouth. And we've always had work. We've had to turn down work because we're not available. Usually those people will wait until we are available. And even though we're still retired, we still have people calling us regularly and asking us to come do work in their church. Columbus, Nebraska right now is undergoing a lot of remodeling and wants us to come do some marbleizing because we're the ones who originally did the work and they want the new work to match what we did 8 years ago.
That makes sense. How did you pitch to your customers? What did that look like?
How did you pitch to your customers?
Generally, when these people are looking for someone to decorate a church or paint a church or restore a church, then the word will go out, and one way or the other, they contact us. And then you'd go and have a meeting with these people, tell them what you do, show them photos of what you had done, and then essentially, try to sell yourself to them.
While we were working, we did have a website and people could go there and see all of our jobs that we had done. And we would drive all over to visit these churches when they'd want us to bid work and stuff. And so we were never very formal about presentations. We would just say, this is what we can do, and we can save you money, because we were always less money than other people, or not everybody, but we were very reasonably priced, and we always tried to give the customer a lot for their money. So they were, we had excellent references always. I know there's a church in Omaha right now that's really pushing for us to come out of retirement and do some more work out there too. So that just keeps happening, and that's fine.
So it would be kind of a combination of word of mouth, a portfolio, website, and then just an impression of you two being trustworthy. So selling yourself, basically, when you talk to the people.
Selling ourselves.
Now, when we started the sign business, that was a little different approach because we had to go out and find customers. Therefore, initially, just told everyone I knew, everyone I ran into, told them what I was going to do, asked them to give me an opportunity to bid any work, and that's how we got started.
And I will say about the sign business, I know we both have said that you need to have capital and you need to have some backup, but the way that evolved at the time, I had been hospitalized several times and was not working. And Roger's job that he had, they said, if you want to keep your job, you have to move to Arizona. And we didn't want to move to Arizona. So all of a sudden, with a mortgage and kids, we had no work. So in that instance, we didn't have much of a plan or backup, but we did make it work. It was ugly, but we
You think that your client base you built up with the sign business helped with the church decorating at all? Did that kind of help you build a reputation?
It did help with the reputation, but it's such different work that I don't think it generated any. But I will say we made connections with different people, like say electricians and such, that they would refer us to their customers who might be the churches. And we did get some work that way.
So tell me about this picture we're looking at here with this table. Would that have been the sign business? Would that have been during Riley's life?
This was a sign business. This was actually a relative of a friend of mine, and he contacted me and he said, I have this restaurant and I want to put a big table on top of it. Instead of having a sign, I want to have this table to show everybody what we do. And so this table is actually 1.5 the actual size. So all of the, like the salt and pepper shaker that are there in the front, they look like a couple of little Mexican guys sleeping. But they're, I don't know, probably 10 inches tall. The carafe pouring the liquid is 2.5, 3 feet high. You know, the table is about 10 foot square, I would guess. It's all quite large. It's covered with Bondo, body putty. And then all of those things that are up there are made out of foam and then covered with Bondo and then painted.
And he did all of that work in our shop, which we had a shop in Omaha at the time. He made all of those components, and the base of it is a huge steel framework, and they had to use a crane to put that up in place on this roof. It's 75th, and it's still there, 75th and Pacific in Omaha, on top of Fernando's Mexican restaurant. The guy that we did the work for had seen something similar in his travels out on the West Coast, and he really wanted that for his business. To the best of our knowledge, it's the only thing like that in Omaha.
Now, I would guess anybody that's watching this has seen this before.
Yeah.
So that I know, that's at Henry Dorley Zoo, down by the petting zoo. I think they're remodeling that area again for their Alaskan coastal display or something. So he's going to move again. But how did this come about? Can you tell me about the hippo sculpture?
The idea with it, I have a friend that's a cartoonist and a caricature artist, and he called me and said, somebody approached me on making a trash can. And he said, I want you to come in on it. I think, you know, this is more suited to what you do than what I do. And the original idea is they were going to have a baby hippo sitting up like a dog. And supposedly what was going to happen is as you walk by, the motion would start a recording that would tell you to throw your can away in the trash can in the throat of the hippo. And the vacuum cleaner that goes on. So as you put it there, it actually kind of sucks your trash out of your hand down into the trash can.
But none of that worked.
None of that worked because of the size of everything. So my recommendation at the time was, well, let's make a hippo that's submerged in water, and they can put plants around it so they looks like lily pads or something. And then it'll do the same thing, but it'll be more actual size of a hippo and look more like a hippo. So I sculpted a 1/10, I think, size sculpture. And we did it with clay, and then we froze it in a freezer, and we mailed it to this guy in California, and he manufactured the fiberglass.
Right. So the design of the hippo is from Roger's sculpture, but the manufacture of the hippo itself was done in California. We did not do that. And he's fiberglass.
Yeah, and he's a fellow that does a bunch of work for Disneyland, so very accomplished at fiberglass work.
It looks kind of like something you'd see on the Jungle Cruise.
It does, yeah.
So you mentioned sculpture, so I'll bring up these two. You said the hippo was carved out of clay. Is that what we're looking at here, is a clay sculpture?
Yeah, this is plastilina clay, which is an oil-based clay, stays soft forever. I had a sculptor that we decorated a church for him, and he does a lot of soldiers, monuments in bronze. And we were talking one day, and I said, well, someday I'll do a sculpture and I'll show you how we dressed when I was in Vietnam, you know, what it would actually look like. And so I did this basically just to show him. This is about 23, 24 inches tall. And it's essentially a Vietnam soldier from the bush in Vietnam.
You got it. Is that the same sculpture?
That's the same sculpture, backside.
But see the ponytail, and that is Vietnam. You know, our friend that does the veterans museums and what have you, he has a fit because he said, well, that's not official and you can't have your hair like that. Well, it was a different era. And in Vietnam, they did too, let their hair grow out, and they didn't do everything to the letter of the law.
So basically, this was not for money.
No.
It was just for fun. But it did, at a point in time, led to us actually bidding some work to possibly do the statuary at
Memorial Park.
Memorial Park. We
Mhm.
get the job, but we did get to bid it.
So everything ends up falling into something else. I mean, that has been the way it's been our whole working career. Still is that way.
Sure. So I have a couple other sculptures here. There's this one and then another one of Mickey Mouse. And after you said everything leads into something else, that kind of made me think of this one. Because
That was a really
the-
fun job.
the dragon seems kind of reminiscent of this guy.
That job, that was down in Branson, Missouri. They have since painted it out, but we did that quite a few years ago, and it's a plain cinder block building that we painted to look dimensional, and you can see like in the turret that it's kind of looks like it's coming out of the wall. That's a flat wall, and then we painted the stone, did the design so that it all looks like it's stone as opposed to just a flat wall. There's not one all 100% done. The bottom right is closest to all done. And
They wanted a vampire, a monster pointing at the entrance.
yeah,
And so that's Nosferatu.
but it never worked because that was on the back side of the building, which was away from all the traffic. And the owner ended up going bankrupt because he didn't design these things very well, and somebody else owns the building, and they didn't want a monster on their building.
So we mentioned before that you had two businesses, which kind of leads me into my next question. How come you changed streams there with what you were doing, and what did you learn from being self-employed? What mistakes did you make, and what did you do really well?
When you ask about the streams of what changed so much, when we started our sign business, we were the first business in Omaha that bought all of the computer generated vinyl sign making equipment. And we spent a fortune buying all of this equipment, which was great. It made us a lot of money. Equipment always makes you money. But what happened in Omaha is for probably the first couple years, we were basically it for who you could come buy all this stuff from. And
We had other sign companies come to us even.
tons of other sign companies buying from us.
And political campaigns.
Yeah. And we had a
Fleet work. And
we
so
we lettered all of MUD's trucks, if you can imagine. At the time they had over 300 trucks and everything for the airport. But then what started happening in Omaha is people that wanted to start a business found out about this new technology and started opening these little Signs Now shops and stuff in the strip malls and hiring minimum wage people to operate their equipment. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that what happened is it brought down the price of everything so low that we couldn't make the kind of money that we needed to continue to make. So
Supply and demand.
Yeah, so that was why we switched gears. We still do some signage. Creighton University, we did everything for them for years, and we still do some lettering for them, even though we're retired. So our version of retired is not exactly 100% retired, but we still have a lot of the sign equipment and we still use it. Sometimes we even use it for Girl Scouts.
So what lessons did that teach you when things started to go a little south with your ability to earn money in the sign business? What type of tips or hints would you give to future entrepreneurs about how to handle things like that when life throws you a curveball?
You have to majorly be thinking ahead. And then you have to assess your skills and what you can and can't do. We've been very fortunate that between the two of us, we have enough skills, that marketable skills, that we can find something that pays money.
Something else to do,
Yes.
right? To fill in the
Um,
gaps.
Right, but it's a lot of making, you can't just stay stuck and never look ahead. You have to constantly look ahead. And if there's a market trend that is working against what you're doing, you've got to be finding another niche somewhere.
Yeah, as an example, in the old days, if you delivered ice and they came out with a refrigerator, it was time to look for something else to do.
That's right. So we've never let that just say, oh, we're done. We've just said, well, we have to figure out something else. And sometimes you might try something that doesn't work. Sometimes you might have to fall back on, there was a time period in there in the 90s where I went back to work for a real estate company painting part-time just for the benefits, because being self-employed, health insurance is outrageously overpriced, and so we needed some benefits. One thing I forgot to mention early on is that you do have to know, when you're starting a business, you do have to know about the laws where you live. You have to know about what type of corporation you want to be. So you have to do some research on things. I fortunately had worked as a bookkeeper for many years and a payroll clerk for many years for another company. So that helped enormously with some of the skills we needed in our business in bookkeeping.
And as far as incorporating,
Yeah,
that's something you do to protect yourself personally.
yeah.
Because if something were to go wrong on a job, and there would be some really heavy financial problems created by it, if you're incorporated, that protects you personally, so you don't lose your house and your car.
Well, and you have to be licensed and insured. Most people will ask for that. If they don't, that's kind of silly on their part. But and we were also bondable. We never had a company take us up on that, but what that means is that our credit was so good and our liability so low that we qualified to be bonded through an insurance agency for the amount of the value of the job, which guaranteed to the client that if we didn't get that job done properly and in the right amount of time, that the insurance company would cover them financially for losses incurred by us, created by us.
So I have one more question for you, and then we're going to be about at time. What is your favorite thing looking back over your career about being self-employed?
The flexibility. Being your own boss, there's a lot to be said for that. You're responsible to your customer, but you get to decide how to proceed on a lot of these projects and how to execute them. And you're answerable to no one except the client if you don't get it done right.
My favorite thing is probably the flexibility as well. We didn't have to miss our kids' things every week. I mean, we could miss them, but we didn't have to.
Well, thank you, Libby and Roger, for joining us today. We'll have another session with you two in 2 weeks. I appreciate all of your insights. If everyone enjoyed this session today, like I said, we'll have another one in 2 weeks. And that one, we will actually have a new set of pictures and be asking some new insights into being an entrepreneur and starting a business. And I think you guys have just had an incredibly interesting career. And this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. I really enjoyed going through these photos with you guys and loved hearing your input and insights into things. So thank you. And we will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Have a good rest of your day, Spirit of Nebraska, and thank you for joining us.
Thank
Thank you, Erin.
That did go fast and it went very well. I talked too much for you.
No, I prefer that you talk.